Let me give you some context for today's discussion. Back in March 2021, Minister for NND, Mr. Desmond announced that Singapore will be building public housing in prime locations like the city centre and the Greater Southern Waterfront. To keep these new flats in these prime locations affordable, additional subsidies will have to be provided. However, when we provide additional subsidies, it may also result in larger windfall gains when these flats are subsequently sold at market value. Why is there a need to give additional subsidy? Haven't we already have a template on enhanced housing grant, etc., etc.? Why is there a need to give more subsidies just to let people afford this supposedly more atas HDB flats? But let's continue on. There's also a concern that these estates in prime locations will become gentrified over time. Gentrified means that the neighborhood becomes more atas through influx of affluent residents and businesses that suit them. And these flats may subsequently transact at higher prices in the resale market because over time only the better off can afford them. I guess in a lot of ways that is inevitable. That is why we don't see HDB flats in Nassim Road, we don't see HDB flats in Orchard, Somerset or even Newton area. And determined not to allow elitist neighborhoods, NND has now finalized their outcome on how we're going to protect these HDBs from becoming overly inflated. The rule reads, minimum occupancy period 10 years and then subsidy recovery rules. In addition to that, there's also a resale buyer criteria that will be different from normal resale flats. I'll go through them in a while, but let me share with you what I've previously read from the original consultation paper done with many Singaporeans. In that study, they actually put in young working adults, first-time owners, elders, and professionals. And the first thing when I read the report is something that Steve Jobs mentioned before. You cannot just ask customers what they want and then try to give in to them. By the time you get it built, they will want something new. That has a lot of wisdom because very often, who is buying have their own self-interest when they put in their feedback. In any case, Henry Ford has also mentioned before, if I ask customers what they wanted, they have told me they want a faster horse. That's why I never rely on market research. But quite obviously, the outcomes that we'll be going through are all from the market research. Some points that were not taken from that research, let me highlight them first. Capital gains taxes, something that drew a strong reaction from those that were surveyed. And while capital gains taxes sounds very nice, those that made a profit, they have to give it back. There is always problems when implementing it because people find loopholes. Think back on ABSD. ABSD wanted to prevent people from owning multiple properties, correct? And what it created ideas such as decoupling, whereby couples now own two separate houses together. And when it comes to estate, if there's no will, then it could be a big mess. All couples now buying kids' property is using a trust structure so that they can avoid ABSD. People are smart. If they really want to get around it, they will find a way. So capital gains taxes, while it sounded good, thank goodness it was not implemented. A second idea was also to return some of the proceeds back to CPF special account. Actually, it's quite good news, Your buyer is actually helping you in your retirement. And by 55, if you burst past the full retirement sum, that is an amount that you can tap on. So what was actually implemented is this 10-year MOP rule, whereby a homeowner needs to stay there for 10 years before they can sell it off if they want to do an upgrade, for example. That is 5 years more than the usual. But hey, if you got a unit there and you manage to get additional grant, waiting 10 years before upgrading is actually not a death sentence, correct? In that case, you're still going to see massive gains. You're just compounding their gains. I don't know how much it will solve controlling the prices, but that's been implemented already. The second restriction is you can rent out a house fully, you can only do room rental. But the real killer could be this income ceiling of 14,000, which has to be applied to people who are buying these special atas HDB flats. Let me give you my first thoughts. For any couple that sees the value in buying these HDB flats and are exceeding that 14,000, I've seen before, couples, one of them take a no pay leave or go and do MBA, get within that limit, and then buy because the potential for capital appreciation is very strong. I don't know how much an income ceiling is a big deterrent. In any case, what we don't want is for people who can't afford to buy all these atas HDB so as to qualify for these additional housing grants. And having said all this, I have something that I felt should be implemented but wasn't. And before I get there, I invite you to smash on like button and press on subscribe, especially if you enjoy podcasts like this. The part which I thought should be implemented that wasn't was actually a reduction in the lease from 99 years, perhaps all the way to 75 years. I thought that would be a very effective method. Why so? We all understand the Bala curve. When the house lease is 60 years or less, you have restrictions on your CPF. People are concerned a bit more on the house value becoming zero when the lease expires fully. That naturally has a dampening effect on demand. I thought implementing that would have been very powerful, very effective in controlling the price increments of these flats. Imagine after 10 years, now the lease is still 99 years. Someone who bought that took the additional subsidy, selling the lease with 89 years left, it is still good as new. How nice it would have been if we implemented 75-year lease and then 10-year MOP. By then, only left with 65-year lease. I think whoever who is buying naturally would tighten the purse strings a bit. Naturally would be less incentivized unless they're looking to stay there long term, which is the original objective of filtering the right Singaporeans that want to stay there long term and can afford it. So there are many ways to solve things, and these measures are not cast in stone yet. What are your thoughts listening to this podcast on the various measures that government has implemented as well as my own inputs? What are your thoughts? Leave in the comment section below, because I think this is going to impact a lot of Singaporeans, especially when we feel disgruntled when certain projects have a lot of appreciation and certain big grants are given that we may interpret as fair or unfair. Leave your comments in the section below and stay tuned for the next podcast, because if there are new news and updates on this topic, I'll share it with you over here. With that, I'll sign off. Take care and goodbye.